I'm sitting alone in my apartment on my 28th birthday, scrolling through my best friend Paige's wedding photos to Mark. Yes, the same Mark who cheated on her 3 years ago. The same Paige who looked me dead in the eye and said, "Zoe, you can do so much better than Logan. He's too nice." And now she's living her fairy tale while I haven't been kissed since I walked away from the most perfect man who ever existed because I believed her. My phone keeps buzzing with birthday messages, but they're all from co-workers and distant relatives because my 3 closest friends are too busy with their new married lives to remember. Paige posted her honeymoon photos from Bali this morning. Megan just announced she's pregnant with her boring accountant husband's baby. And my sister Hadley, who spent years telling me I was wasting my youth being tied down, just moved in with her boyfriend of 8 months. Meanwhile, I'm here eating leftover Chinese food alone, wondering how I became the cautionary tale when I was supposed to be the success story. Let me back up because this whole mess started 5 years ago when I had everything. My name's Zoe. I'm a marketing coordinator, and back then I was living with Logan in this cute apartment downtown. Logan was everything you could want in a boyfriend. Loyal, thoughtful, caring, always putting me first. We'd been together since college, and honestly, I thought I'd won the relationship lottery. Logan remembered every little thing I said brought me coffee during stressful work weeks, never made me feel like I was asking for too much. When the pandemic hit and we were stuck inside for months, Logan made it work. He watched my reality shows even when he was bored dropped. Everything when I was upset, always made sure I was okay first. I had him pretty well trained, though I didn't think of it that way then. I needed to know where he was and who he was with, because that's normal in relationships, right? But when he'd ask me the same questions, I'd get annoyed and say, "Logan, you're being clingy," and he'd apologize. He always apologized. His college friends wanted to hang out constantly, but they were honestly kind of immature, always playing video games or going to sports bars. I'd suggest we do something else instead, just us two. Logan never complained. He used to play guitar all the time, but I'd make little comments about the thin walls and annoying the neighbors. Eventually, he barely touched the thing, but I wasn't trying to control him. I was just looking out for our relationship. Logan seemed to understand because he'd always go along with what I suggested. We had this perfect routine. He'd text me throughout his workday, ask about my day when he got home, try to fix anything that upset me. Weekends were whatever I wanted, staying in, trying new restaurants, whatever. Logan made everything easy. Then, something shifted. I started getting this restless feeling like something was missing. I was only 24 and had barely dated anyone before Logan. I'd gone straight from my parents' house to college to living with a boyfriend. Suddenly I was wondering what I might be missing out on. That's when my friends really started getting in my head. My best friend Paige had just gone through this brutal breakup where Mark cheated on her, so she was in full man-hating mode. Then there's Megan, who's younger than me, and basically never single, always jumping from relationship to relationship. And my sister Hadley, who's always been the wild one, constantly talking about how I settled down too young. These 3 had been making little comments about Logan for months, but it really ramped up after Paige's breakup. "Don't you think Logan is a little too accommodating?" Paige would say. "Where's his personality? Where are his opinions?" I'd defend him at first, but then I'd start noticing things. Megan would show me dating app profiles, not because I asked, but to prove her point about what was out there. "Look at this guy," she'd say. "He's a personal trainer, and getting his MBA, he has ambition beyond just making his girlfriend happy." I'd look at these profiles and think about Logan, who was perfectly content with his regular job and our quiet life. "Zoe, you do realize normal guys don't act like that, right?" Hadley said one night. "Normal guys have their own opinions. They don't just mold themselves into whatever their girlfriend wants." I felt defensive, but also curious. Was Logan really that different? Had I gotten so used to someone who prioritized my happiness that I'd forgotten what normal looked like? Paige got really intense about it. "I just worry that you don't know what you're missing," she'd say. "You've been with him since you were basically a teenager. Don't you want to know what else is out there before you commit your whole life to one person?" They started asking questions that got under my skin. What's Logan passionate about besides you? What are his goals for the next 5 years? If you weren't in the picture, what would his life look like? I realized I didn't have good answers. Logan's passions had faded away. His goals were all about us. Without me, I wasn't sure what his life would look like. "You're settling," Hadley told me bluntly. "You met a nice guy when you were young, And you're confusing gratitude with love. You're beautiful, you're smart, you could have anyone. Don't you think you deserve someone who brings out the best in you instead of just agreeing with everything you say? They weren't wrong about everything. Logan had changed over the years. He had become more accommodating, more focused on my needs than his own. But I'd seen that as evidence of how much he loved me. My friends saw it differently, as weakness, as a lack of self-respect, as settling for a smaller life. Look, Megan said during one particularly intense conversation, I'm not saying Logan's a bad guy, I'm saying he's a safe guy. And safe is fine if you want a safe, predictable, boring life. But you're 24, you should be taking risks, meeting new people, figuring out who you really are outside this relationship. The peer pressure was intense but seductive. These were my closest friends and my sister. They were all telling me the same thing, that I was wasting my potential settling for less than I deserved, missing out on something important. You know what I think Paige said one night after we'd all had drinks? I think you're scared. You're staying with Logan because it's easy and comfortable and you don't have to risk getting hurt. But that's not living, that's just existing. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was choosing security over growth, comfort, over excitement, certainty over possibility. The more they talked, the more I started seeing my relationship through their eyes. Logan's devotion started looking like desperation. His accommodating nature started feeling like lack of personality. Once that poison really got into my system, everything changed. I started seeing Logan completely differently. Things that used to make me feel loved suddenly made me feel suffocated. When he'd text during the day, I'd think, can't he go 5 minutes without checking on me? When he'd ask what I wanted for dinner, I'd think, why can't he just decide something? I started testing him, constantly setting traps he didn't know existed. Like suggesting expensive restaurants for his birthday instead of the sports bar he'd mentioned. He'd just smile and make the reservation. And instead of feeling grateful, I felt disgusted. Where was his backbone? I started picking fights over stupid things. He'd do dishes, and I'd find something wrong with how he loaded the dishwasher. He'd suggest watching a movie, and I'd shoot down every option until he'd say, you pick then. And I'd get mad that he didn't have stronger opinions. Every time he tried to smooth things over, it made me more irritated. You don't have to agree with everything I say, I'd snap. You're allowed to have your own thoughts. He'd look confused, because for 5 years agreeing with me had been what made our relationship work. My friends kept feeding the fire. See, this is exactly what we were talking about, Paige would say, when I complained about his latest weakness. You need someone who challenges you, not someone who just goes along with whatever you want. I became obsessed with the idea that Logan had lost himself in our relationship. Instead of recognizing my role in that transformation, I just felt resentful that he'd let it happen. You used to play guitar, I said to him one night. You used to be passionate about music, what happened to that? He looked surprised, since I was the one who'd made comments about the noise. I can start playing again if you want, he said, missing the point entirely. I didn't want him to start because I asked. I wanted him to start because he wanted to, regardless of what I thought. I started fantasizing about what my life would look like with someone different, someone who would challenge me, who had strong opinions, who wouldn't defer to my preferences constantly. I started withholding affection as a test. I'd be cold and distant just to see if Logan would fight for me. But he'd just try harder to please me, bringing little gifts, doing extra chores, being even more attentive. His efforts to win me back when I hadn't even told him anything was wrong just confirmed what my friends had been saying, that he was overly needy and had no self-respect. Then I lost my job. Nothing dramatic, just company downsizing. Instead of seeing it as a temporary setback, my brain jumped to, this is a sign that everything needs to change. My friends had a field day with this. This is perfect timing, Paige said. You're not tied down by work commitments. You could literally go anywhere, do anything. They made it sound so appealing. You could come stay with me and Mum and Dad, Hadley said. Take time to really think about your future without anyone else's expectations influencing your decisions. The implication was clear. Logan's presence was preventing me from discovering my true self. I spent 3 days wrestling with the idea, and Logan could tell something was wrong. He kept asking if I was okay, if there was anything he could do. Every time he asked, I got more annoyed because I felt like he was pressuring me. I just need some space to think, I told him. His face fell immediately. Space to think about what he asked, his voice getting smaller. About us. I should have reassured him, explained I was just overwhelmed about the job. Instead, I said I need to think about everything about what I want my life to look like. The conversation was horrible. Logan tried so hard to understand what had changed, what he'd done wrong. He offered to help me look for jobs in other cities, suggested we take a vacation, proposed couples counselling. But I shot down every suggestion because I'd already made up my mind. You don't understand, I told him. I've never been on my own. I don't know who I am when I'm not part of a couple. When he said we can figure that out together, I felt nothing but contempt. He kept trying to fix things that weren't broken. He apologised for being too accommodating, promised to be more assertive. He said he'd start playing guitar again, reconnect with old friends, develop independent interests. He was offering to change everything I'd been complaining about, and it just made me angrier. That's not the point, I snapped. I don't want you to change because I'm asking you to. I want you to want to change. I want you to have opinions and goals that don't revolve around making me happy. My friends convinced me his love wasn't really about me. It was about his need to feel important and necessary. You know what you need to do, Megan said. Stop torturing both of you. If you're done, be done. So I made the decision on a Tuesday while Logan was at work. I started packing, throwing clothes and personal items into boxes. I was running on pure adrenaline and conviction that I was finally doing something brave for my own growth. I left him a note, just a cowardly piece of paper, saying I needed time to figure out who I was outside our relationship, that I was going home to my parents, that this wasn't about him doing anything wrong. Complete lies. I was abandoning someone who loved me without giving him a real explanation. Logan came home while I was loading my car. The look on his face when he saw what was happening will haunt me forever. He read the note with shaking hands, then looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. "Zoe, please," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Please don't do this. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it." Then he got on his knees, actually got down on his knees in our driveway and begged me not to go. He was crying, pleading, promising to be different. It was so weak. And instead of breaking my heart, it just confirmed everything my friends had been saying about his lack of self-respect. "This is why I have to go," I told him. "Look at yourself, Logan. This isn't what a confident man does." I drove away while he was still kneeling there, still crying, still begging. I felt nothing but relief and vindication. I thought I was finally free from a relationship that was holding me back. For the first few weeks, I felt amazingly liberated. I got a new job, quickly started hanging out with old friends, began thinking about what I really wanted to do with my life. Logan tried to contact me constantly, texts, calls, emails, flowers. Every attempt just reinforced my decision. It proved he was clingy and overly attached. "He's being way too persistent," Paige said when I showed her his messages. Normal people accept when a relationship is over. I blocked his number. After a month, blocked him on social media, told my parents not to give him information. But after the initial high wore off, I started realizing what I'd actually given up. The first crack appeared 3 months later, when my mom mentioned running into Logan's mum at the grocery store. "She said he's doing really well," my mom said casually. "Started therapy, reconnected with old friends, even picked up his guitar again." I should have been happy for him. Instead, I felt this weird stab of jealousy, like he was supposed to be miserable without me, not thriving. Where was all this self-improvement when we were together? My friends dismissed my feelings. "Too little too late," Paige said. "He's probably just doing this to try to win you back." But as months passed, I kept hearing updates that suggested otherwise. Logan had gotten a promotion. He'd started playing open mic nights. He joined a hiking group and was posting pictures of adventures that looked fun. He wasn't trying to contact me anymore. He'd actually moved on. And I hated it. I hated that he was fine without me. I hated that he was doing all the things I'd wanted him to do, but for himself instead of for me. I hated that my leaving had been the catalyst for him becoming the person I'd wanted all along. My dating life was a disaster. The guys I met were nothing like what I'd fantasized about. They were either too aggressive and made me miss Logan's gentleness, or just as accommodating but without any genuine care. I went out with Marcus, who seemed perfect on paper. Confident, successful, had strong opinions about everything. But spending time with him made me realize there's a difference between having a backbone and being selfish. He didn't accommodate my preferences because he didn't care about them. Another guy, Trevor, was passionate about his career and hobbies exactly like I'd wanted Logan to be. But his passion didn't extend to me. He was so focused on his own goals that I felt like an afterthought. I found myself missing how Logan used to prioritize me. "You're comparing everyone to Logan," Hadley pointed out. "That's not fair to these new guys." But that was exactly the problem. Logan had known me better than anyone, loved me despite my flaws, been willing to build a life around making me happy, and I'd thrown it away. The worst part was watching my friends move on with their lives while I stayed stuck. Paige, who'd been so adamant I was settling, got back with Mark, the same one who'd cheated. Suddenly she was posting about how love required forgiveness. Megan, who'd shown me dating profiles insisting there were better options, got engaged to some guy she'd been dating 6 months. Someone nice and stable, exactly what she'd told me I was settling for. Hadley, who'd pushed hardest for me to experience freedom, was suddenly in a serious relationship with someone good to her in all the quiet ways Logan had been good to me. I felt betrayed, like they'd encouraged me to blow up my life just to prove some point, then moved on to build the exact relationships they told me weren't worth having. "You're being ridiculous," Paige said when I confronted her. "Just because I got back with Mark doesn't mean your situation was the same. You needed to leave to grow." But had I grown? At 26, single and bitter and full of regret, I didn't feel like I'd discovered anything profound. I felt like I'd learned the grass wasn't greener, that stability and kindness were rare, and that I'd been an idiot. The breaking point came when I reached out to Logan 8 months after leaving. I convinced myself I just wanted closure, maybe, to see if we could be friends. I unblocked his number and sent what I thought was a thoughtful message about missing our friendship. His response was polite but distant. He said he was glad I was doing well, that he'd moved on and was in a better place, and that he thought it was best if we didn't reconnect. He wasn't mean about it. He was just done, completely done with me. That's when the panic hit. That's when I realized I'd made the biggest mistake of my life with no way to undo it. Logan had been the best thing that ever happened to me, and I ruined it because I let other people convince me I deserved something better than unconditional love. The friends who'd encouraged me to leave were nowhere when I needed support dealing with the consequences. They were busy with their own relationships, their own lives. The sister who'd pushed me to choose independence was suddenly too busy with her new boyfriend to return calls. But the real devastation came almost 2 years after I'd left Logan, when I saw the engagement announcement. Not hers. Some girl named Emma, who looked wholesome and sweet and grateful to be with him. The post was simple. He asked, I said yes, and I can't wait to marry my best friend. I stared at that post for hours, scrolling through comments about what a perfect couple they were, how happy Logan seemed, how Emma was exactly what he deserved after everything he'd been through. They were talking about me, about how I'd broken his heart. I went full social media detective. Emma was a teacher, volunteered at an animal shelter, had this warm, genuine smile in every photo. She looked like someone who appreciated kindness instead of taking it for granted. Someone who would never consider Logan's devotion weakness. The photos of them together told a story that made me sick. Logan looked completely different. Confident, relaxed, genuinely happy. Not the desperate, accommodating version he'd become with me, but the person he was supposed to be, with someone who brought out his best. Emma was living the life I could have had if I'd been a better person. If I'd encouraged his interests instead of crushing them. If I'd appreciated his love instead of taking it for granted. She was getting the version of him I'd trained out of existence. I found out Logan had proposed at the same coffee shop where they'd had their first date. Thoughtful and romantic, exactly the kind of gesture Logan used to make for me before I'd made him feel like his romantic nature was embarrassing. The worst part was realizing Emma was getting all the benefits of the work I'd forced Logan to do on himself. I'd criticized him for being too accommodating, so he'd learned to be more assertive. I'd complained about his lack of independence, so he developed his own interests. I'd made him feel weak for being emotional, so he'd learned to be more confident. I'd been like a terrible life coach who broke someone down, then abandoned them only to watch someone else benefit from all the growth I'd demanded, but never stuck around to appreciate. The wedding photos posted months later were the final blow. Logan looked radiant, like a man marrying his best friend. Emma looked like a woman who understood exactly how lucky she was. They looked like two people who brought out the absolute best in each other. I stared at those photos for hours, torturing myself with images of happiness I'd given up. Logan dancing with Emma, both laughing, his family embracing Emma like she'd always belonged. Emma's friends celebrating with Logan like they genuinely loved him. It was everything I dreamed my wedding would look like, back when I still had someone who wanted to marry me. But I destroyed that possibility with my selfishness and stupidity. I couldn't even be angry at Emma. She hadn't stolen Logan. I'd thrown him away. She'd just been smart enough to recognize a good man when she found one, and secure enough to appreciate his love instead of questioning it. Which brings me back to today. My 28th birthday, sitting alone in my apartment, scrolling through wedding photos, while my married friends are too busy to remember the day. I'm officially older than Emma was when she met Logan. I'm starting to panic about my age, about my dwindling chances of finding someone who would love me the way Logan had. But even if I did meet someone new, how could I trust my judgment again? How could I be sure I wouldn't sabotage something good because I was too broken to recognize it? My friends are all moving forward. Engagements, marriages, promotions, new homes. Meanwhile, I'm stuck in the same place I was when I left Logan, except older and more bitter, and carrying the weight of knowing I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. The people who encouraged me to leave Logan are living proof I was an idiot to listen. They're all in relationships now, posting about date nights and how grateful they are for their partners. But when I try to talk about my regrets, they shut me down. They don't want to be reminded of their role in my destruction. That's when I realized the most devastating truth. I'm completely alone with the consequences of my choices. The support system that had been so vocal about encouraging my independence disappeared when I actually needed support. 3 years later, I'm watching Logan live happily ever after, with someone who was everything I should have been, but wasn't. Emma was grateful where I'd been entitled. She was supportive where I'd been critical. She encouraged Logan's growth where I'd stifled it. And me, I'm still here, still alone, still bitter about choices I can't unmake. Still convinced that somehow this is everyone else's fault except mine. Still thinking that if Logan had just fought harder, if my friends had given better advice, if the universe had been more fair, things would be different. But deep down in the parts of myself I don't want to acknowledge, I know the truth. I had everything I ever could have wanted, and I threw it away because I was too selfish and stupid to recognize it. Logan didn't fail me. My friends didn't fail me. I failed myself, and now I get to live with that failure for the rest of my life. Watching from the sidelines as the man I hurt builds a beautiful life with someone who was smart enough to appreciate what I was too foolish to keep. Some mistakes you just don't get to come back from. Some chances you only get once. And some people, once you've broken their heart and shown them exactly who you really are, will never give you the opportunity to hurt them again. Logan was my once-in-a-lifetime love, and I treated him like he was disposable. Now he's someone else's forever, and I'm nobody's anything. I trusted my friends, who all ended up married while I'm alone, and honestly, that's exactly what I deserve. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, so you never miss the next one.